Hello, welcome to 251, two pianists, 5 minutes, one subject. And today we're going to be talking about jazz and meditation. My name's Nick Tomlin.
And my name's Simon Whiteside, and this is 251. Jazz and meditation, an interesting little philosophical one for us today. I think it's fair to say, Nick, you meditate, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I've been doing it for quite a while now. I'd say over 20 years. Regular meditation, yeah.
And also, I meditate regularly. So what sort of time do you spend?
Probably around 30 minutes is the most I can manage.
Yeah.
So,
and do you do that in the morning or
it tends to be in the
whenever?
evening, really, when I have time in the evening, yeah.
And do you do, this is a very meditational question, open or closed eye meditation?
I close my eyes, yeah.
Yeah. And do you use any of the apps like Calm or Balance or anything like that?
No, I mean I just use a timer basically. That's all. No, I don't use any apps at all really.
So, so we put our cards on the table. We're both meditators. So that's one of the reasons I thought it'd be quite good to do. However, jazz and meditation didn't start recently. It's been going for some considerable time. And actually, there's a book called Effortless Mastery by Kenny Werner, which has a meditation element to it. And I think when you look at the book title Effortless Mastery, you think, oh, that's a book about practice. But in fact, it's a book about getting your brain into the right state to improvise. And although he is very clear that you have to practice a lot, he also is talking about how to get yourself into the right state to improvise, which I think is quite an interesting aspect. One of the early people who got into that was, have you heard of Tony Scott, the clarinetist?
Yes, yeah.
He wrote, he played a lot of bebop and that sort of music, and then he got a bit disenchanted with it. I think partly because the clarinet, I mean, him and Buddy DeFranco are probably the only bebop clarinetists of note, and in fact Tony Scott's not even as well known as Buddy DeFranco. So he got a bit disenchanted with his instrument and also the way in which music was going. And he decided that he would take a sort of road trip and go to places like Japan and study a bit. And he brought out an album called Music for Zen Meditation in 1965, which is a combination of Japanese instruments and him on clarinet. Very different from, it's not really jazz and meditation in that sense, but he was clearly a jazz player and continued to play jazz in all forms. And I suppose the other main person who is well known for having a spirituality and a meditative aspect to his music is John Coltrane, and those late albums, which are very sort of religious in a way, aren't they? And, tied up a bit with Islam, I suppose, but also with the idea of sort of meditating on and mantras like "I love supreme, I love supreme," and just saying things again and again. And I thought the other interesting thing I've thought about this is that, do you know Jerry Begonzi? He in his sort of jazz method thing, he talks about flow state and things like acceptance and non-judgment and being in the moment. But one of the interesting things he talks about is he thinks there's two types of consciousness that you need to play jazz: spotlight consciousness and floodlight consciousness. Have you heard of those?
No.
Well, spotlight consciousness is for practicing, i.e. on spotlighting on one thing, getting deep into something like, how certain modes or whatever. But when you improvise in general, you want floodlight consciousness, which is more like all of everything.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah,
which I think is pretty good. Have you got any thoughts you'd like to add before we?
No, only that really. I mean, I definitely see a connection. I think when you, in the actual process of improvisation, I find there's definitely a connection between that and the kind of meditative state where you're sort of aware, but you're not actually thinking as such. I mean, it's difficult to explain, but I find there's a connection between those two.
Well, this has been 251 on Jazz and Meditation. I'm Simon Whiteside. Goodbye.
My name's Nick Tomlin. Goodbye.